KPBS On Demand is supported by the San Diego County Toyota dealers, presenting the new 2025 Camry with refined design and performance. Visit your local Toyota dealer to learn more about all the features the new 2025 Camry offers. The San Diego County Toyota dealers. We make it easy.
Breaking news at the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport where multiple faith leaders have been arrested.
There's well over 10,000 people now.
Statewide strike action is being planned in Minnesota.
We're living in turbulent political times with almost daily reports of protest. But with a constant barrage of news, IG Reels, and TikTok videos, people can start to tune out and not hear the protesters' message.
Protest is a form of art. It is an art form. Let's treat it as such. And if you don't realize you're performing as an activist out in the streets, it might be a bad performance.
That's where tactical frivolity can come into play.
We are live over downtown Minneapolis where, yes, that is a protester in a Viking costume riding what appears to be a porcelain bathtub on skate wheels. 15 ICE agents are on his heels, but look at this. He's pulling away. All units, watch the slush, watch the slush.
Okay, that didn't really happen. It was an AI-generated video on a parody account, and it uses absurdity to point out the absurdity of what protesters are facing. It's like an SNL skit, and it raises some questions. Does comedy have a role in protest? Can laughter be a tool in political debate, even when events turn tragic?
A 37-year-old woman was shot and killed by an ICE agent in Minneapolis on Wednesday. Here's how it unfolded.
More than half a dozen federal agents were seen on cell phone video Tuesday surrounding this 5-year-old boy.
Videos of the shooting of Alex Preddy have contradicted the government's account of what happened.
But humor has been used in response to the most horrific circumstances. Frederick Douglass used satire and irony as an activist tool to fight slavery. In 1943, a Belgian resistance group published a fake issue of the newspaper Le Soir filled with biting satire about the Nazi occupation, prompting the Gestapo to arrest some of the publishers. But ridiculing German propaganda helped fuel resistance. During the Prague Spring, Czechs removed street signs and painted over building numbers so invading forces didn't know where they were going. And George Orwell proclaimed, "Every joke is a tiny revolution." Welcome back to listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie. I'm Beth Accomando. Comedy can have power. Or why would President Trump try to get the likes of Stephen Colbert, Seth Meyer, and Jimmy Kimmel off the air? Remember, court jesters were meant to entertain, but also to address uncomfortable truths. Sometimes laughter comes with a painful wince. It can also fall on deaf ears or offend. The ancient Greeks, Romans, and Egyptians wrote satires that made them targets of political retribution. And political cartoonists have been thrown in jail for making fun of kings. Right now, we're witnessing the protest frog brigade in Portland, parade balloons of baby Trump in diapers, and viral videos of ICE slipping on ice in Minnesota. Do those things make us stop our doom scrolling and laugh? Does the laughter make us pay attention even for one brief moment? And does that mean we'll share it and talk about it? We're going to go off topic to don an inflatable costume and discuss tactical frivolity as a protest tool and then see how it plays out in movies. I need to take one quick break and then I'll be back to discuss tactical frivolity in real life and in film.
The last man nearly ruined this place. He didn't know what to do with it. If you think this country's bad off now, just wait till I get through with it.
KPBS On Demand is supported by ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties. The work of the ACLU is about closing the gap between the America that was promised and the America that is. Learn more at www.aclu-sdic.org.
Welcome back to Cinema Junkie. I'm Beth Accomando. I confess, current events can be exhausting. The Constitution is in crisis. History is being removed or rewritten. ICE is detaining children. There are still conflicts in the Ukraine, Israel, and Palestine. So much is happening. But what can you do? How can you make a difference? It can be so overwhelming that you end up paralyzed and just do nothing. But those in power often rely on people feeling powerless or can hope to incite a violent reaction in order to ramp up its own response. But what if you diffuse the violent energy of the oppressor with humor? What if you decide joy is an act of rebellion? And what if someone came to you and said, put on this inflatable T-Rex costume and let's go dance in front of the Federal Detention Center? L.M. Bogad is author of Tactical Performance, Theory and Practice of Serious Play. He's also a performance artist activist, professor at UC Davis, director of the Center for Tactical Performance, and co-founder of the Clown Army. So, to begin, let's have him define tactical frivolity.
I first heard that term in the late 90s when activists in the social movements protesting things like the WTO, the World Trade Organization in Seattle in 99, demonstrations like that were also very theatrical and involved whimsical costumes, always with a point though. Like in the WTO protests, people were concerned about the environment and like turtles going extinct. So people showed up as turtles and as polar bears, like dealing with climate change and the extinction of species. So it was tactically frivolous, but again, don't forget the tactical part, so that it is about what it's about. It's about a refutation of the authorities' version of events, refuting their story in a playful way and telling our story in a playful way, while being just disarmingly charming. Because how mad can you be at a frog in Portland? How mad can you really be? If you're yelling at a dancing turtle in Seattle, you're the one who looks ridiculous. They already look ridiculous and they don't care. It's deliberately looking ridiculous. And it is the use of a thoughtful version of being ridiculous. And I refer to this as radical ridicule, not just because it sounds like a nice phrase, it's fun to say, but that there's a radical element to it. And not in some bad way, but like, hey, we're getting to the root of the problem here with this ridicule. And the ridicule includes the vulnerability and the openness to make ourselves look ridiculous. So it's like, come on, don't take yourself too seriously, dictator, because we're willing to look like clowns and butterflies and whatever. What's up with you? Why don't you lighten up a little bit? But also that more people may be attracted to what you're doing because you're having fun. It makes people who are angry maybe a little less angry, or at least less able to act violently on that anger. I like to say it's politically more expensive to club a clown than to club a regular person. Because if you get that on video, which inevitably these days you will, people go, what is up with this authoritarian state? Like attacking these butterfly people. That I don't even know what the issue is, perhaps, but I know that's wrong. So it is a thing that raises the cost of repression, and it tells your story in an inviting and playful way rather than a dogmatic, we have no sense of humor. We like to chant the same slogan over and over again. Like the formats of protest that are cliche, it avoids the cliche trap. By the way, this is one tactic. Sometimes it's utterly inappropriate. It's just one tool in the toolbox. Sometimes you have to be very serious. But on the other hand, tactical frivolity, I like to think of it as serious play, because you're taking the problem seriously enough to work harder and be funny. So conventional kind of demonstrations sometimes are exactly what you need, but sometimes they're a little cliche and they're more easily ignored, because cliche in any art form is easily ignored. Give people a little vision of what you're for, not just what you're against. Like, we're for a world in which people are having fun out in public spaces together. It's diverse. Everyone can express themselves. That's what we're for. We're also against, clearly, what's going on here, and we're protesting. Let's not forget. But to just be like, no, 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 it makes it hard to build a movement on that. So I like to think of tactical frivolity as an element of charismatic action that attracts more people.
So there's also this sense of repression and cruelty that's going on. So can the mere act of being joyful feel rebellious? Is that also part of this?
Absolutely. Resistance is fertile is like the counter phrase to the idea of that resistance is futile, right? And to have this fertile situation where it's like, actually, this is playful and generative. And I was afraid to go out, but for the last couple of nights, I've seen that people are doing all these funny things and they're having a good time and it seems to be going okay. Now maybe I'll go. So it's like lowering that threshold and saying, maybe it's not so scary. Maybe it's okay. You do need the first few brave people to start, though. And we always give them kudos, give them respect. Like, that's really important. But once they start doing it, it's more inviting. And it is absolutely a way to get over that fear. You know, it's also like for people who've been doing it for years or decades, we're getting burned out. And it's like, oh, my stomach hurts, my head hurts. Like, it's actually having a physical effect on you to be a lifelong activist. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is fine. I'm still protesting, but now I feel good, not bad. Sometimes there's admittedly it's not actual armor, but there's a conceptual armor to going to a protest in a character with a fun costume too. It's not actually rubber bulletproof usually, but maybe we need to work on that part of it. But I was part of a group a long time ago that made that festively decorated gas masks. So we could go to the protest with gas masks that weren't just scary paramilitary things, but they actually blocked the tear gas and they were fun theater masks. So it's like this combination. And I think that stands in as like a practical thing to do and the metaphor for let's do things that are practical and cultural and fun and inviting and playful and disarming, right? Think about what it looks like and think about how what you're doing tells your story and doesn't support the other people's story or actively undermines their story. And the more dishonest their story is, the more fun and easy it is to undermine. So when a certain authoritarian says, Portland is overrun, it's on fire, and the anarchists are all coming to get you, and then you go to Portland and you're like, it's a nice bohemian town and people are drinking coffee and okay, that's weird. This is another reality. Okay, but now we have to do something that shows the general audience of America that this is nonsense. So like they're doing things, as you've probably seen, they're leading aerobic classes outside of the ice center. More to the point because of the content, they're leading like Latin dance classes. And this is like, you guys seem to have a problem with this culture, but actually let's do this dance and you'll see how fun this is, right? So that's whimsical, but also kind of on point.
Now, your book is called Tactical Performance. So is tactical frivolity a subcategory of this?
Totally, I would say so. And the reason it's a subset is it's super important. But like I said, you got to have lots of different tools, right? So, it's fun to talk about the funny ones, but there's also so my book, Tactical Performance, which the subtitle is The Theory and Practice of Serious Play. So again, playfulness can be funny, but it doesn't have to be funny. I do think it should have some element of surprise. And I don't mean hiding behind a tree and jumping out and going boo, but just like not being cliche. So you can do something that's very sad and makes people feel the feelings of, oh my God, this is so sad. This should never happen. But what's going to make that stick for people is if it's not a cliche, if it's a beautiful altar that you've set up in front of the state capitol on the steps. And it's an altar to the victims of a certain situation. And it's made really beautifully. And there's music playing and there's, performance around there. If you see what I mean, where they won't forget. And it got them at just the right angle. You want to get around people's, I've seen that before, I'm not looking kind of response. So that's to me, that's why tactical frivolity is one of a bunch of techniques.
Now, in your book, you mentioned the freedom fighters, and they came to lunch counters. They sat there. They were verbally abused, physically abused. And this went out on all the networks and created this sense that there was a need for change. I grew up during that time. I was born in 1960. And back then, we only had 3 news outlets. So everybody was basically working with the same fundamental information. But nowadays, the information is coming from so many places. So do these images and these tactical performances have as much effectiveness when the media base is so much more broad and diffuse and people can choose to believe whatever they want?
Yeah, no, totally. It is much. I think it's harder. I think it's like we have to adjust to that and adapt to it. So you develop a project and you're thinking about the action logic and the social dramaturgy of it. And you're like, okay, we want to do something that both reaches people through their own amateur social media. We want to do something where it's in a place where hundreds of people will just record it on their phones and upload it into these algorithms, into these social media forms. And admittedly, they'll be channeled in a certain way because of algorithms. So we don't want to be over optimistic, but there's that. And then we also want to do something that gets earned media that is so interesting that the big media will cover it. And again, you're right. Everything's so polarized and splintered. Yeah, if it gets on CNN, that's great, but it's also it's not ABC back in 1965, right? It's totally different, but it's still better than nothing. And then you want to do something where it has a life of its own and it just keeps lingering. You do actions that you're not going to get everyone, by the way. You also have to be a little humble. Like, hey, we're one group in a whole cultural, social movement. Let's do actions that will do something. Any individual action isn't going to do it all. And you have to have persistence and just be part of a movement. So I really try to advocate for what's the irresistible image here. What I mean by the irresistible image is an image we can create with our tactical performance that is so strange, so compelling in some way that even our ideological opponents will reproduce that image. They'll then comment on it that it's bad, and they'll mock it or they'll be negative towards it. But that's okay, because the idea of the irresistible image is it tells our story. Just if you look at it, it tells our story. And people may or may not agree with it, but it's been told. And then add whatever caption you want. As long as you show our image, at least people know what we're about, and then they can decide. And, I think you're going to reproduce this one because all your competitors are, because it's such a strange and compelling image. By the way, easier said than done, but I've seen it happen. Ideally, it's something that undermines the authoritarian version of events. And I think the dancing frogs and everything, all of that is an example.
So I think when they pepper sprayed the frog, people who approved of that and shared it and said, oh yeah, he got what he deserved. But the image itself is saying something else. It's saying this is ridiculous. And I think that was one of the images that kind of did carry its own message no matter who shared it.
No, I agree with that, Beth. And I think that's a good point that, again, you cannot convince everyone. There's 30 to 40% right now, I think, of the public that would be very hard to move on any issue for ideological reasons, et cetera. But that's okay. What about the rest? That leaves a lot of people to talk to. And most people looking at that image would be like, that's absurd. Again, it's politically more expensive to club a clown. I think it's politically more expensive to deliberately pepper spray a frog. Like most people aren't going to appreciate that, right? So I think that is part of it, raising the cost of repression and making it seem more fun to be part of the resistance, right? And again, specifically exposing the dishonesty of the dominant narrative. Oh my God, Portland is this dangerous place. And you see all this fun stuff happening, totally nonviolent. And the only violence you're seeing is from certain people in very scary uniforms.
So what you've been involved with and what we've been talking about has been in-person protests and live events. So how does tactical frivolity translate into film or into satire or into stand-up comedy and things like that? Is there a place for it there? Are there things in those realms that also reflect the idea of tactical frivolity?
I would say yes. And of course, as you've already pointed out, Beth, it is different. The film is something people work on for years or even a decade or more to make this finely crafted, every second counts project, a good film, right? It's amazing. And tactical performance tends to be more rough and ready. We don't really know what's going to happen. We rehearse for all different responses, because that's part of the training and the discipline is we don't know. We know what we're going to do. We don't know what they're going to do. So it is a different format, right? However, you see some of these principles playing out in the narrative of some of these movies, right? Where authoritarians do not like to be mocked. So they just overreact and crush any mockery because it is going to undermine their unquestioned authority. So when you see in some movies the authorities being mocked in that way, yeah, it doesn't always have to be completely silly. If we think about Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator.
Strange. These strike leaders, they're all brunettes. Not a blonde amongst them.
Brunettes are troublemakers. They're worse than the Jews.
Then wipe them out.
Too small. Not so fast. We get rid of the Jews first, then concentrate on the brunettes.
We shall never have peace until we have a pure Aryan race.
We'll kill off the Jews. Wipe out the brunettes. Then will come forth our dream, a pure Aryan race.
Beautiful blonde Aryans.
They will love you. They will adore you. They will worship you as a god.
No, you mustn't say it. You make me afraid of myself.
And The Great Dictator is playing this almost balletic dance with the inflatable globe because he just wants to rule the whole world. That's haunting. It's fabulously performed. It's wonderfully choreographed. It's not zany clown humor. It's oh, okay, right. So you can hit any different kinds of mark. Idiocracy, sadly, that film Idiocracy becomes more and more accurate as the years go by. It used to be this satire based in exaggeration of what's going on. And it's starting to feel more and more like a documentary.
So who are you?
I'm the Secretary of Energy.
I won a contest, got to be a cabinet member. I'm the Secretary of State. Brought to you by Carl's Jr.
Why do you keep saying that?
Because they pay me every time I do. It's a really good way to make money. You're so smart, why don't you know that? The Secretary of Defense. And Funbags over there is the Attorney General.
And that's Secretary of Education.
It's kind of stupid, but he's President Camacho's stepbrother. Still does a pretty good job, eh?
You know, satire can seem so irreverent and disrespectful, and it is, and that's the point. But I think there's also something kind of wonderfully sincere about satire in a strange way, in that the satirist is showing that they care about how bad things are, and they clearly have values that are being ruined or disrespected. Like, they're upset. That's why you write a satire. It's not to make all the money. So you're doing it because you're upset, and you actually are idealistic. You just don't want to admit it. So you satirize what's bad.
Now, I understand everyone's shit's emotional right now, but listen up. I got a 3-point plan to fix everything.
Break it down.
Number one, we got this guy not sure. Number two, he's got a higher IQ than any man alive. And number three, he's gonna fix everything. I give you my word as president. He'll fix the problems with all the dead crops. He's gonna make them grow again.
President Camacho stood before the world and promised everyone that Joe would solve all their problems. He would not only end the Dust Bowl and heal the economy, but he would cure acne and car sickness as well.
Part of tactical frivolity, of course, is mocking the lies or the outrageous behavior of those in power. And you will see that in movies that are politically motivated in this funny way. You exaggerate the flaws and you mock the abuses of power. I feel like Duck Soup is so anarchic, right? So Duck Soup and the Marx Brothers, it goes back quite a ways, right? So is it like, if you're saying, well, what are their actual policy positions? Let's ask Harpo. Oh, wait, he's not talking. You know, so they're not telling you blatantly what they support, but they are mocking a lot of the arrogance of power and bureaucracy and officiousness and aggression.
I'd be unworthy of the high trust that's been placed in me if I didn't do everything within my power to keep our beloved Fredonia at peace with the world. I'd be only too happy to meet Ambassador Trentino and offer him on behalf of my country the right hand of good fellowship. And I feel sure that he will accept this gesture in the spirit in which it is offered. But suppose he doesn't? A fine thing that'll be. I hold out my hand and he refuses to accept it. That'll add a lot to my prestige, won't it? Me, the head of a country, snubbed by a foreign ambassador. Who does he think he is, that he can come here and make a sap out of me in front of all my people? Think of it. I hold out my hand and that hyena refuses to accept it. Why, the cheap, four-flushing swine, he'll never get away with it, I tell you. He'll never get away with it. So, you refuse to shake hands with me, eh?
Mrs. Cesar, this is the last straw. There's no turning back now. This means war.
They're just absolutely mocking it. So I think there's so many examples. The Death of Stalin, it is a blistering satire of Stalinism, but by connection, all totalitarianism.
I've got documents. I have documents on all of you. 13th of March, 1937, Zolotov trials, 42 dead, 173 exiled. Your signature. That's enough. Yeah, well, you signed on the life of your own fucking brother.
Oh, you think that was easy, you bastard?
Of Gorev, how did your conscience accommodate that? And Zykov, poor blameless, guileless Zykov, all of you. All of you! I have documents on all of you! I've seen what you've done. I know the truth. It's all written down. It's all written down on a very f***ing long list.
Like, you can choose to be comfortable and smug and say, oh, that's just about Russian history. And like, well, it is, but it's not only about that. It's about anyone who behaves in that totalitarian manner. And they really are mocked.
Stalin destroyed the status quo, and he rebuilt it. He was liberal. Radical. He was radical.
The fact that everyone just used their own British or American accents, they didn't bother with bad Russian accents. And I was like, oh, that almost kept us from getting too immersed in it.
I propose a halt to deportations, the release of some existing detainees under Article 31, and the suspension of all arrests that were officially sanctioned 3 days ago.
Whoa. That's like wiping your ass on Stalin's final list. No.
This is demonstrably revisionist.
Releasing people we arrested 3 days ago will make us look cretinous.
Yeah. And I thought that was a great choice because, yeah, we're not going for emotional realism here. We want you to just keep being entertained by enjoying the mockery of these very bad, powerful people.
So there's one scene in that film, which is my absolute favorite. It involves the politician Beria, and it displays his absolute pettiness and vindictiveness. And the scene is hilarious and horrific simultaneously.
Shoot her before him, but make sure he sees it. Or in this one, kill him, take him to his church, dump him in the pulpit. And I'll leave the rest up to you.
That is one of the scenes that also sticks in my mind. Yes, they're mocking that character, but they don't need you to ha-ha laugh. But so there's some moments you go, huh, oh, like that is awful. But I have to admit, it's good writing. Like, you still feel like you're in good hands as an audience member because the acting is good, the comedy timing is good, the writing is good. And so you're like, okay, I was willing to go there with you but you're also giving me the horror. And that's important. It does, because the topic deserves that. And again, some folks feel that satire in protest or film trivializes the atrocity. And it's like, well, if it's poorly made, it can trivialize. If it's not thought through and it's too glib or something, yeah, sometimes it's not taking it seriously enough. But often it's taking it very seriously by doing the hard work of figuring out how to make it funny while punching up, as they say. You're not mocking the victims, you're mocking the cruel abusers of power. And, to keep the humor laser focused in that way, to make the point, is something that a great satirist will do successfully.
And this, of course, will lead me to Mel Brooks, because if you want to talk about the most ridiculous example of this, it's Springtime for Hitler.
Germany was having trouble, what a sad, sad story. Needed a new leader to restore its former glory. Where, oh, where was he? Where could that man be? We looked around, and then we found the man for you and me. And now it's springtime for Hitler and Germany.
And he took a lot of flack for it, too, but he always said that his motivation was to mock Hitler. And in an interview, he said, if you mock Hitler, you make him small. I'm not making fun of anything that happened in the Holocaust to the Jews. I'm making fun of the person who perpetrated this. And that's what he had to say about it.
That's right. That's a great point. And some people have done this and I feel, miss the mark. They'll handle something like the Holocaust and they're not as talented or they're not as thoughtful. And I think it is possible to go in the wrong direction with that, even though your intentions were not bad. The Producers is not an example of that. And let's remember, it was about 20 years after the Holocaust. It was not now. It was much more raw and memorable. And people who had survived the Holocaust were definitely still around and their families. So it's like more risky than we even realize now. If you put it in its time and context in the 60s, it's unbelievable that he did it. But I think it worked in the long run because it was actually respectful of the victims and relentlessly mocking the evildoer, the murderers.
Frankly, kid, I was never a member of the Nazi Party. I'm not responsible. I only followed orders. Who are you? Why do you persecute me? My papers are in order. I love my adopted country.
And I think when you think about the Producers, there's this thing about he does it in a surprising way. You could have just somehow just directly mocked Hitler, like, frankly, Chaplin did so well. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great. But he was like, no, I'm going to take you on a narrative where you don't realize where it's going. And the first few scenes, you're following a couple of guys who just aren't doing that well in life. There's this guy who's a failed theater producer. And then there's this nebbishy accountant. And who are these guys? Why am I meeting them? I don't know, but it's funny, so I'll keep watching. And you get to Hitler after this whole long thing that's so complicated of them realizing, oh, we're going to defraud theater investors. What? He just literally, and then it leads to this satire of Hitler. And I think what's brilliant about that is you do not see it coming. Of course, he's not just doing this to talk about a couple of fraudsters who get caught, but in the meantime, it's madcap and wacky. Of course, it is all that. So it works as a comedy and it earns its moment. But you earn the moment, and that's an old term from theater. Like if you're going to be preachy, earn the moment. You got to entertain people. There's got to be good writing, acting, jokes, timing. Everything's good. And now you can preach at me in the last part and I'll learn a lesson. Otherwise, boo, right? And talk about earning the moment. He makes this funny madcap comedy of this ridiculous idea, but then it turns into this hilarious and unbelievable satire of Hitler and anyone who supports fascism. Anyone who supports that you might be laughing at the movie, but you're being mocked, believe me. And you have that character of the pathetic Nazi who loves Hitler, is this goofy character actor who was one of Mel Brooks's great actors. Mars was his last name.
Hitler was better looking than Churchill. He was a better dresser than Churchill. He had more hair. He told funnier jokes than he could dance the pants off of Churchill.
Exactly why...
Churchill!
It's Churchill. That's exactly why we want to produce this play. To show the world the true Hitler. The Hitler you loved. The Hitler you knew. The Hitler with a song in his heart.
And so he's there to also be a foil. Like, oh, anyone who takes Hitler seriously and thinks he's great, you're this moron. You're this idiot in the storyline who loves the musical because he doesn't get that it's ridiculous. And he only gets mad later when he realizes it's so terrible, you know? So you have to have that character too. And I remember when I first saw the movie, I was like, why do we have this dude in a German Nazi helmet? What is happening? And I was like, oh, because you have to have the guy to make fun of who believes in these terrible ideas and then make him an idiot, right? And then you have the musical, the audience is scandalized. But of course, then it's the 1960s and the hipsters are like, oh, I love the cool irony of how you're mocking Hitler. And it becomes a hit when it needed to be a flop. I mean, that's great. It's like a Rube Goldberg contraption that leads in an unexpected way to the mocking of fascism, which is wonderful. Yay, we like that.
And then where do you see people like Jon Stewart and John Oliver fitting in? I mean, I sometimes find that I go to them for my news because at least they're honest about their opinions, but they use humor, they use comedy. How do they fit into this notion of tactical frivolity?
Well, I think it's interesting because I don't know, you know, it's not so frivolous. I think what they're doing is so important because they're actually fact checking. I mean, imagine this. It's up to the comedians now to be the trustworthy and, you know, news people. And, you know, my sense of it, having watched a lot of it, is a lot of their shows and loving it. They have their own perspective, of course, and they also have to shape things so that there's a punchline. So the way you shape the news coverage, it has to end. These are comedy shows.
The one lesson this administration seems to have taken from Iraq is, beyond the weapons of mass destruction and fentanyl disruption and regime change, yada, 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 there might also be a side benefit to this war you should know about.
Venezuela has the largest reserves of oil in the world.
And I'm sure there are U.S. companies that would like to do business there.
You know, I didn't think this war was a wise decision, but if it helps the oil companies smile again.
They are fact-checked, peer-reviewed, multiple sources reporting going on, and they can stand by the honesty and the accuracy and withstand a lawsuit. Like, they're doing things so that the dictator, wannabe dictator, sues them, and they're like, go ahead, because we'll win. When I talk about serious play, how serious can you get? They're covering very serious topics, doing serious coverage.
And to add insult to injury is the denial of the reality that we all witnessed. They're lying. We saw it. And that's how brazen they lie when they know we've seen the truth. That's how they lie when they know we know. Imagine how they lie when there's no evidence to contradict them. And maybe that more than anything explains why Alex Preddy really was a threat. Because he was brandishing a weapon. A handheld, aluminum, 1080p, 60 FPS weapon of mass illumination. Because there is nothing more dangerous to a regime predicated on lies than witnesses who capture the truth.
It's hard work. And I would say the tactical frivolity side of that is when you see Jon Stewart or one of the other comedians on the show, he'll cover the topic and he'll really make a pointed critique. He'll make it absolutely funny and also make fun of himself.
Eerie is the Iraq parallel? Well, we got one guy making the same case for both wars. And yes, it's who you think.
Saddam Hussein's a threat to my country. He's a threat to our way of life. He needs to go.
Maduro is an existential threat to the people of the United States.
It is time for Maduro to go.
Now, to be fair, some things have changed over the last 20 years. You know, back in the Iraq War, we used to play clips of Lindsey Graham and make jokes suggesting that he's secretly gay. But now, we know that that was inappropriate.
And we appreciate that because he's like, look, I'm going to hit myself too. I don't take myself, I'm not self-righteous. I'm not going to just go after this guy. I'm going to spend a fair amount of time making fun of myself and being vulnerable that way. Because first of all, it's funny, it's charming, it's disarming, and it's saying I'm in on it too. I'm part of this too. I'm going to do that. John Oliver constantly does that as well, making fun of himself as well. And I think that's really important. There have been several attempts on the right to do comedy news shows, like to counter them over the years. There's been a few. They never work out. And it's not, I don't want to say it's because those people aren't as talented. Maybe they're not, by the way. But there's also something about being authoritarian where you can't mock yourself or your team ever. John Oliver will constantly mock people who are similar ideologically to him.
Protesters this week showed admirable restraint. In fact, just watch this guy respond to getting tear gassed with an almost annoying degree of LA chill.
You told me you got caught up in the tear gas as well. Describe what happened to you.
Oh, just tasted a little tear gas. Tasted like fascism.
Has there ever been anyone more Los Angeles than that man? Snarky attitude, sunglasses at night, beanie and sweatshirt in June, and a perfectly timed look to camera, all while looking like Travis Barker's tether.
And if you're an authoritarian, you got to just constantly mock the other people. You can't admit any weakness. You can't ever admit you're wrong or that anyone on your team is wrong. Makes for really boring comedy that doesn't really come across. I really think it's a limitation. I really do. And I think that's one of the core reasons why their shows have not been as successful, because they have very loyal viewers. They've got a big fan base, and these shows never work because, you know what? Soviet comedy shows weren't that great either. Like, they just couldn't step outside of a certain box, so it's not that funny, you know. The thing that parallels tactical frivolity is that level of just having a sense of humor about yourself, too, and making yourself ridiculous, too.
And there's one last thing I want to ask you about, and that's irony. So sometimes I'll see a show like John Oliver, Jon Stewart, and they'll have somebody saying, oh, look at Portland, it's a hellhole, look at the violence. And there's a part of me that understands it's irony and it's funny, and they're going to cut to the protest frog or a lovely scene in a park. But they put it on film in such a way that someone else could take that image and say, look, even Jon Stewart agrees that Portland is a hellhole. So what's the role of irony right now? I mean, is there the danger that people will take it as fact and not understand that there's a comic element to it or an element of satire?
Yeah, no, that's great. And, you know, there are also just the people I call irony deficient. They just aren't going to get the irony, no matter how obvious. I've done several recent street theater and technical performance projects. And as always, and this is what I do in my trainings too, I train people to go, when you realize that somebody is on your side and is getting upset, and they just can't process your ridiculous costume and your absurd, like Swiftian Jonathan Swift, you know, A Modest Proposal kind of irony, just break character and tell them. You don't need them to be upset. Just be friendly. This is not method acting. So I'm not Robert De Niro doing a wonderful method acting thing. And I would just say, listen, this is a prank. We're doing street theater. Oh, thank you. Okay. So I mentioned that because irony is risky. The benefit you get from being ironic is when people get the joke, they're doing a little work and they get satisfied. They get to feel bright for figuring it out. And then you're bonding because you're making the same joke. My favorite thing is when you do one of these and people joke back to you in character. Now we're doing activism. We're doing shtick together. We're doing improv. We're having fun. It's more fun than just preaching at someone and then they get bored and walk away, right? So I like it when we make the irony together. I throw it out there. You close the joke by showing you get it and come back. Wonderful. But if it fails or backfires or misfires, you got to clean up your mess. It's really important. Like, I'm sorry, I have a ridiculous hat. This costume is absurd. The whole idea is absurd. Come on. But it didn't work. I did something wrong or you didn't get, let's just talk. Let's be unironic now. So yeah, when you're doing so, to get back to your point here, when you're doing something that's preserved forever on TV or, you know, in digital media, maybe it's good to have the visual cue along with your verbal cue. So you have something better than this, but like the danger of Portland, and you just show some people drinking coffee, really good, strong coffee in a cafe, you know, or music, something adorable or something great, and it's there on the screen with you. So it's like they can either block that out where they're obviously censoring something, or go to a lot of effort to delete that visual image, and then you can sue them, right? Or they include it and it undermines the fact that they're trying to take you out of context, et cetera. You got to find countermeasures. One of the things I do in my tactical performance trainings is I train people we practice talking to the media. And it's like, what's the soundbite you want to say? And let's figure out the thing that you absolutely don't want to say, because it's a mistake and it will be taken out of context, right? Let's try to say that in the training so we know what not to do. Like, let's make the mistake now when there's nothing at stake. So I think your question is good. I think there's ways to avoid that and to keep the irony, but to be aware of it, to be aware that, yes, nowadays that can totally happen.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me about tactical frivolity of all kinds.
Yes, Beth, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show. It's great.
I need to take one last break, and then I'll be back with Andrew Boyd and Maren Exler of Beautiful Trouble to talk more about tactical frivolity.
Hi, it's Terry Gross, host of Fresh Air. Hey, take a break from the 24-hour news cycle with us and listen to long-form interviews with your favorite authors, actors, filmmakers, comedians, and musicians, the people making the art that nourishes us and speaks to our times. So listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.
Welcome back to KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie. I'm Beth Accomando. Andrew Boyd describes himself as a longtime creative campaigner, as well as co-founder of Beautiful Trouble, and editor of the book on Beautiful Trouble. Maren Exler describes herself as the elder Gen Z social media support to a lot of Andrew's creative campaigns. She's also the creative director of the satirical group Trillionaires for Trump. To begin, I asked Andrew what his definition is for tactical frivolity.
I would just say tactical frivolity is the use of humor in a contested political space. We're in a increasingly authoritarian environment where a lot of the optics are deployment of power and threat in a way that cows people into submission or into sort of ducking their heads. And so puncturing that bloated sense, that bloated strutting of authority is something that humor and ridicule can do. Tactical frivolity is a way both to disarm a situation on the streets where the forces of authoritarianism benefit from a response in kind. They're just wanting a violent response. They're wanting a response of like us looking like a guerrilla army and going up against their rogue state army, their, Trump's Gestapo. So that's what they want. That makes them work. That gives them power. That legitimizes what they want to do, the sort of heavy fist that's coming down. And if we respond in an unexpected way, in a way that undermines that authority, that turns the whole situation into, makes the idiocy and the absurdity and the illegality of that feel like an overreach and a rogue action and just ridiculous response to there isn't a reason for them to be there. And so we're going to make that very evident and clear by being in a frog costume, or, in the 60s, putting a flower in the barrel of the gun right past the bayonet, and both disarming the situation and making them seem ridiculously macho and paranoid. And so, yeah, humor can play a role in undermining authority in a very, very powerful way. And we're seeing it in the streets, particularly most iconically in Portland with the frogs and everything else.
And Maren, how does tactical frivolity play out in social media, and how can it be effective or powerful?
In the current attention economy, it's very difficult to get people to pay attention to information that they would need to take on to do something that creates transformation. And the easiest way to capture attention is through humor. And humor helps people stop and watch the video all the way through, and then learn what are the action steps that they can take in order to move the needle or move something forward. And so the frivolity, especially the satire, at least of the Trillionaires for Trump, what we've seen is that first moment where people look at the video and they're like, what is this?
Us billionaires have gathered here today to promote our campaign platform, Raise the Rent. Childcare for the few.
Slow and expensive buses.
city that only billionaires can afford.
And then they watch and they realize, oh, it's satire. Oh, they're making fun of these people. Oh, that's really funny. That's really smart.
Tax the poor! Tax the poor!
Then, we see way more engagement and actual consuming the information that we want to dispel. I've created videos before that are very straightforward, this is what you should know, this is what you need to do. They don't go anywhere. And then, we make one video and we're the billionaires against Mamdani and we're running through the streets of New York and that gets 3.2 million views. And that highlights how ridiculous it is that billionaires are spending so much money to stop a mayoral candidate. So that's kind of the role that humor and tactical frivolity really plays on social media.
And Andrew, you created this website, Beautiful Trouble. So explain what it offers to people.
Now, just to be very clear, Beautiful Trouble is a team effort, global team effort. Hundreds of artists and activists and strategists have corralled their wisdom over decades of social change experimentation and sort of culled it into, a treasure trove of wisdom, of best practices, of tactical possibilities in there. So I was just sort of an initiator of that effort, of that bringing that community together to curate this wisdom and offer it up to movements across the world. So it helps you understand the kind of power dynamics, social change dynamics, and then offers you tactical guidance. And for example, there's a lot of what we call principles, design guidelines in the book. It's broken into very modular kind of parts. It's all online in multiple languages at beautifultrouble.org. Anyone can use it. For example, what we were talking about earlier, but tactical frivolity. There's a principle: use humor to undermine authority. We talked about that, and we've seen that happening in the streets of Portland and elsewhere. Don't dress like a protester, which might seem counterintuitive, but if you dress like a protester, people will go, they put you in the protester box, right? And then they put the cop in the cop box, and then they're not interested in what the content is, and the cop knows what to do with you. So it's don't dress like a protester. And then you confound the expectations both of the people wider public you're trying to reach, and of the maybe people who are trying to police you on the streets. Kill them with kindness, right? Don't just go up balls to balls, in the street. Send paper airplanes. The cops are blocking you from the target that you're trying to reach. Send paper airplanes over them, or sing a song. There's so many ways to kill them with kindness, and it catches people by surprise. It brings out the humanity of the situation as opposed to the sort of, us-themness of the situation, our common humanity. Joy is a revolutionary force is another principle in the book. It's I'm sure your conversation with L.M. Bogad sort of brought that to the fore. Here's one that's interesting. If protest is made illegal, make daily life a protest. And you see that happening very much in a lot of the totalitarian regimes during the Soviet era and the other eras, but it's playing out in the streets of Portland. People are bringing their knitting out to the streets in front of the National Guard occupations and the ICE protests and just doing their knitting. It's kind of we're just living our lives here. What are you doing here? Just another couple to give you an idea. The real action is our target's reaction, right? So it's you don't just do an action. You actually do an action with an understanding and with designed to elicit a particular reaction from your target that then becomes part of the larger action. So, if the police were to arrest the frog, that's sort of a ridiculous photo op that you can capture. So those are sort of some of the instigations, invitations that are sort of in the book. It's a whole design manual for doing creative protest and creative social change.
One of the things I really liked about the website is the toolbox page.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you have all these different types of protest tools. And what I appreciated was that not only were you giving people these tools, but you were evaluating them and say, hey, this worked, but this didn't.
That's right.
And I don't think everybody is willing to be that critical of themselves. So explain what you wanted to do with this toolbox and what you wanted it to offer people.
Well, I think that's a great question and a great observation. Was generated from analysis from people's own, many decades of experience doing this and asking that exact question that you mentioned, which is what works about this and what doesn't? What worked about a particular campaign or a particular action, but also about what are the uses and abuses of a particular tactic, right? So as you said, there's all these different approaches in there. We show how do you do a light projection? How do you do a banner hang? How do you do a blockade? How do you do a boycott? They're all there, and we sort of, what is the difference between a hard blockade where you're actually stopping people from getting in and out of a building, and a soft one, which is more just looks like you're sort of symbolically saying that the things that are happening in this building shouldn't be happening or something like that. So what tactic do you want to use for any given situation? And what is, thinking about what's your strategy? And so therefore your set of tactics should build and support that strategy, and your strategy should have know what its goals are. And, there's a sort of deeper thinking about how to design a successful action, how to design a successful campaign. So it's not just like, hey, what feels good to do, but it's just like, why is this? Who's the audience? Who's the target? What will make them change the way they're operating? What will get the results you want? Let's grab the items from it that will help you achieve your goals. But at the core, there is a critical eye. And so we're not just trying to offer all these cool things you can do. We're also trying to encourage people who are deciding to take action, to step into their activist selves, to cultivate a critical eye and a sort of strategic sensibility. So it's not just do the fun thing, but understand here are all these things that we can do, and let's discuss the pros and cons. Let's discuss and hash out our different, opinions on what would be the best next step. I'm glad you noticed that there's some critical thinking in there. It's not just fun and games, right? We want to win.
And Marin, as someone who's much younger than me, what are you seeing about current protests now and younger protesters in terms of what seems to be engaging them or what seems to be connecting with them?
Yeah, I think it's dependent, like place by place, right? Like I feel like the Portland frog thing, it really was like, that's so Portland. And it all started because, as Andrew mentioned, an ICE agent pepper sprayed the frogs, like ventilation. And, I think that the chatter that I saw about, I was like, wow, like that ICE agent tried to kill that person because, that could have been really dangerous. Like that could have been really bad. And how ridiculous of them to come after someone that clearly is not an actual threat to them. I will say, I think that is part of like, the younger generation does talk a little bit about all right, well, if it's not a real threat to authority, like, what are we doing? Like, how do we really undermine it or like change the authority? And I think that's partially why we saw 104,000 people come out to volunteer for Zoran, because I think my generation is very done with being told to like sit down and shut up, and like these are the people in charge, and this is how it works, and this is how politics works, and this is how you play the game. So it's like, fine, we'll show up to the protests, but then we're gonna go lobby for change after. We're gonna canvass for people that we believe in. We're going to support progressive challengers. We're gonna use people power to overwhelm the moneyed interests that are coming at us. But I will say, I do think there is a big psychological question, I feel like, among my generation of like, okay, if we just protest and we go home and nothing changes, like what are we accomplishing? And wanting to be really smart and strategic about the way they engage.
Beth, can I make just one note on the moment when the pepper spray was put into the frog's air vent? Part of the tactical frivolity was how he responded to that. Speaking of the action and the reaction, and he was like, I've tasted spicier. I'm Mexican. What do you expect? So he brushed it off. They didn't have anything on him. They couldn't get to him. He sort of, took it in stride and with such style. And I think that was part of what Marin's referring to, is part of what made this pop off, because of his charm and kind of coolness in the way he responded. And he just, stayed. He's in a frog costume, but he stood his ground. There was a sort of courage and persistence there. That was a very poetic and telling and compelling moment that went by, that helped everything go viral. So it's not just the idea, it's like sort of how you roll. That was notable.
So I grew up in the 1960s, and there were only 3 networks reporting the news. But nowadays, I feel like there's so much more out there, and everybody can just go to whatever site they want to find whatever reinforces their own ideas. So what's the challenge for people who want to protest and want to control their message and get it out there as broadly as possible? I mean, it just seems like there's so much out there. How can you win in that situation?
I think everyone's trying to figure that out. I think what we're seeing is like, honestly, like people are paying attention to things that affect them the most, right? And I think, we talk about the affordability crisis. It was like a big topic in the 2024 election, and it continues to be. And I think it's because even regardless of what TV station you're watching or what social media, influencers that you're getting information from, you're still experiencing day to day, like my rent is going up, my salaries is not keeping up with inflation. It is this like very eternal, prevalent question of how do you get people to focus on, one thing at a time, to combine their power, to then take action. And I think what we're kind of seeing in a different way is like more so what is being reported on is what is relevant and pressing to people every day.
I haven't, figured this out from a pragmatic kind of way. It's one thing to be living in different universes of opinion, right? But then it's another thing to be living in different factual universes. And I think we all run up against this, and you're trying to have a conversation, you're trying to be logical about it, and then you're just like, wait, what? And so that makes it very difficult. But I think just to build on Marin's point, sometimes you can connect with the larger audience across many of these silos when you connect with something very, very real. And we saw that with the Mamdani campaign, as Marin is pointing out, with everyone is almost the vast majority of New Yorkers are having one version or another of the affordability crisis. And Mamdani's campaign was brilliant in cooking that down to 3 or 4 key planks that were so simple and so concrete, right? Fast and free buses, freeze the rent, universal childcare. Boom. Okay, now I know what I'm getting from this guy. And of course, he's got incredible charisma, and his team is incredibly creative and all that stuff. And it was all common sense, right? It was all common sense, and it connected with something that people were experiencing on the day-to-day. And it was done creatively and charismatically. So that kind of package, and then in the context of an election that was the biggest news story for 6 months in New York City, right? So you got that whole package, and that allowed you to speak to a larger audience across these silos than we're used to. And you didn't have to sort of argue a lot of factual things on the ground exactly, just like we're feeling it, and that will make it, those 3 things will make it better. And we reinvented ourselves as billionaires against Mamdani. And our slogans were, Marin, do you want to share how we flipped those 3 main program points around in a very funny way?
Yes, we said raise the rent, childcare for the few, and slow and expensive buses. And when we made our kind of viral video, like someone commented and said, wow, when you put it that way, it really does make it seem so ridiculous that people are opposing him, especially these billionaires. And we're like, yep, that's nailed it.
Tactical frivolity for the win.
I'm tired. Can't we just pay someone to protest for us?
May I share a couple creative responses to the ICE stuff and to the sort of authoritarian push on the street? I've sort of plucked a few. One is, and these aren't necessarily like humorous, but they're just creative. They're outside the box. They're like showing people sort of coming up with all sorts of ways to resist. So one is grandmas against ICE. All right, and these are like buses full of women over the age of 70 who are coming into Chicago and other cities to follow ICE agents around as they do their raids and shout at them, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You know better, young man." They probably got an umbrella and who else, whatever. And so that's like you're using sort of the moral authority that is ascribed to the grandmother type of figure to, morally chastise these folks who are for $50,000 bonuses are doing deep harm and trauma to fellow citizens, right? They should be chastised in this way. Another are like these billboards have been put up in the border regions and in the sort of occupied cities, informing troops of their right not to carry out illegal orders. So very straight, no humor there, but yet a creative way to undermine morale and maybe blunt the Trump's Gestapo. And then I don't know if you saw this video. This is a beautiful, hilarious, fantastic video from Canada where they show how Canadians, the alternative to ICE agents, if immigrants arrive, visitors arrive in Canada and how they're met with nice agents.
It's a beautiful day, and I'm here on the Halifax Boardwalk to take care of some foreigners. And that boat's full of them. I'm Trent McClellan, nice agent. You're gonna need to see your phones. Let's see what's in them. Let's go.
Look at that.
Oh my God!
That's my grandbaby.
That's your grandbaby. How
Yes.
old? Okay, now we're doing a selfie. All right, okay. Up here in Canada, we know ice is always cold, but nice never gets old.
And it's hilarious, and it's very Canadian, and it's all like being very sweet and accommodating, and like, where would you like to go, ma'am? It helps sometimes not just to criticize what's bad, but like present how things could be in the alternative, which does make sometimes, gives you hope, but also is almost the strongest critique. Why couldn't it be this way?
That was Andrew Boyd and Maren Exler of Beautiful Trouble. That wraps up another edition of KPBS listener-supported Cinema Junkie. If you enjoy the podcast, then please share it with a friend, because your recommendation is the best way to build an addicted audience. You can also help by leaving a review. Till our next Film Fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident Cinema Junkie.
KPBS has partnered with StoryCorps for the One Small Step program. We invite you to sign up to have a conversation with a person that may have different views, so you may talk, not about politics, but to understand each other better. Sign up at kpbs.org/onesmallstep.